You're watching 17 WJKS, Jacksonville. Now, news with Doug McElway and Joyce Morgan. John Gaughan has AccuWeather, and Irv White has sports. This is 17 News, live.
People in Charleston and up the coast are bracing themselves, with Hurricane Hugo screaming towards the coast, with winds that could be as devastating, if not more so, than those that hit Puerto Rico. Good evening, everybody. Tonight is the night. We have good news and plenty of bad news tonight concerning Hurricane Hugo.
Well, the good news is that the first coast is going to be spared. But the bad news is, of course, that Hugo will be hitting the coast near Charleston, South Carolina, later tonight, with forces much stronger than forecasters had expected. Let's go now to John Gaughan with our latest update on Hugo. John?
Well, Hugo continued to strengthen throughout the afternoon, and now we're looking at winds right around the eye of around 135 miles an hour. But to compound the problems, Hugo's moving toward the northwest at 20 miles an hour, which means on the northern side of the storm, or it looks like just around the Charleston area, winds could be as high as 150 miles an hour when the hurricane hits landfall later on tonight. Here's a 6 o'clock advisory now at 31.2 north, 78.2 west, moving toward the northwest at 20 miles an hour, a Category 4 storm, making it one of the strongest storms we've seen in a long time on the eastern United States. And the track, once again, is going to take it right through Charleston, maybe just a little to the north, and then back up the east coast. Once again, we're looking at Charleston getting winds up to 140 miles an hour sometime before midnight. So, Joyce, it's a rough go, but luckily the first coast was spared.
And Hurricane Hugo is already affecting some other parts of the nation up the eastern seaboard. Savannah, Georgia is only about an hour's drive south of Charleston, South Carolina. Actually close enough that the low-lying city is also in a perilous situation tonight. We do have a report tonight from Mike Dunn in Savannah.
People right up there are bracing for Hurricane Hugo, which is expected to hit sometime this morning. A bit earlier in the day, Tybee Island was evacuated. Crashing waves and boarded up windows were the sign of the times, as the vacation resort turned into a ghost town. The few remaining were businessmen, desperately trying to protect their property.
Tybee hasn't seen anything like this in 40, 50 years at least. And if the eye comes in here, it'll be devastating.
If it's as bad as they say it is, it's going to be unreasonable.
At 2 o'clock, as high tide hit, authorities were only allowing residents onto the island. And as Hugo continues its approach, they feared that this roadway, the only connection to the mainland, will be wiped out. I'm Mike Dunn reporting from near Savannah, Georgia.
Well, we on the first coast have been spared, of course, the real tough stuff, but Fernandina is on the leading edge of the problem area. So you can bet that some people are taking some precautions up in Fernandina tonight. That's where our Jim Piggott is standing by. Jim?
Well, Doug, you're right about that, but fortunately the worst is over here. Officials here at Fernandina Beach say that we're going to miss Hugo altogether. But you take a look out here, this is what it's been like all day. High seas, just some rain, and a lot of high wind. No major problems, though, from that, but it has been an interesting day. But people here in Nassau County, though, they're not quite sure things are so safe. In fact, earlier today, they evacuated a nursing home and a health care center here in Fernandina Beach just as a precaution. The rest of the people up here, though, they're under voluntary evacuations. And surprisingly, many people have left. They're not quite sure what this storm could do later on.
I sure would hate to go into labor and have a baby during a storm like this.
Brenda D., her husband and friends are doing what they can to keep Hugo from making a wreck of their house.
I don't see very many people taking precaution across the street, and I see lawn chairs and plants and all kinds of stuff that might be floating around in the air in a couple of hours. And we've done a lot of work on our house this past year, and we sure don't want our windows busted out.
The D's plan to leave later on tonight, and so do many others. They're just taking those last-minute steps as a precaution. Many don't plan to stick around to see the wrath of Hugo. Already, high water is seeping up to some coastal streets. But these high waves have scared off others. They've taken shelter inland, an evacuation shelter set up by the county. Slowly, people are trickling into the area shelters. Now, Juanita Cook and Mildred Kitchell were there at the shelter early this morning, and for them, they wouldn't be anywhere else.
Well, if I stayed on the island, it would. I wanted to get off before we were, got marooned over there, because I've gone through several hurricanes, and I have a lot of respect for them.
Schools weren't the only thing closed. Government offices were as well. And throughout the day, Nassau County officials have been meeting, assessing the storm to see if a mandatory evacuation is needed.
Now, at the latest meeting they had with Nassau County officials, they really did breathe a sigh of relief because Hugo has moved further north, and they're glad about all of that. Really, now all they're worried about are some of the after effects. Of course, with that, there's always a possibility of some heavy rain and possibly some tornadoes. So they are concerned about that. They are keeping an eye on that. Flooding was a major concern up here, and they still were worried about that. But here's what they're saying could happen now. Since the storm is moving north, they say actually the tidal waters that moved in could actually be sucked out by the storm if it moves up north. So that's the situation, at least as it stands here in Nassau County. A big sigh of relief. Doug, Joyce?
Okay, Jim, and of course with the storm building in intensity now, the after effects and the side effects that all these southern areas are seeing are going to be worse than what they had initially thought.
But there's another place that really missed some of the big mess that Hugo was going to do, and that's Brunswick.
That's right. As the crow flies, you know, Brunswick, Georgia is not terribly far from here. But as far as hurricane conditions go, it's going to be a world apart. Experts are predicting much worse winds there. Our Derek Hayward is standing by live in Brunswick with the latest from there. Derek?
Yeah, Jim, welcome to beautiful St. Simon's Island. We're on St. Simon's Island, which, of course, is right between the effects of Hugo and Brunswick. Most of the 15,000 people on here now have all been evacuated to the mainland. It was a voluntary evacuation. Yesterday, they were very concerned because people were ignoring the order to move. But today, finally, most of the people on the barrier islands got moving. So many of them said they'd wait until the last minute, and they did. But now most of the 15,000 people on St. Simon's and the other barrier islands here have tossed belongings in their cars and heeded the civil defense call to evacuate to the mainland. Complacency turned into action this morning when families started shoveling sand into bags and erecting boards to protect their houses and businesses.
We waited to see if it was going another direction, but it looks like it's headed straight to us.
But not everyone is leaving the barrier islands.
I think it's kind of interesting to see how the weather works out. And
the more experienced people, though, were the first to show up at the 3 shelters.
Like some of these idiots I saw on TV over there, the St. Simon's and Jekyll Island.
Oh, we're happy to be here. We're glad to be here. We're here.
Are they feeding?
She's going to get our food now.
Yes, she's going to get our food now.
What are you going to get?
And they got coffee up there.
Anything that McDonald's has got that we want.
And we don't have to pay for it or anything.
You can't ask for better than that.
That's the picture here, and other people are now pouring into the shelters this evening as the weather begins to worsen here at St. Simon's Island. We're starting to get some heavy winds here. As you can see, the rain is pouring down. If you live in this area, by the way, St. Simon's Island, you're still on the island, or Jekyll Island, or if you're in Brunswick, this is a number you need to write down. If you should have any trouble getting out of where you are, and if you're in any of these low-lying areas, this number you're going to see on your screen is the Brunswick Civil Defense. Call that if you need help evacuating from any of these barrier islands. The only other thing I have to tell you back in this area is if your kids go to the Glynn County Public Schools, you can forget all about that for the rest of this week. Now we're going to go to Brad Sussman in Jacksonville Beach to see what's going on there. Brad?
Certainly a different picture here at Jacksonville Beach. It's been a relatively nice day in Jacksonville, and I had every intention of starting out this story by telling you the conditions down here at Jacksonville Beach are just great. But as of about 5 minutes ago, the wind started picking up. I'd say gusts to about 30 knots. Behind me, you can see just a roiling sea and a very ominous sky, indicative of Hurricane Hugo. Now, throughout the day today, we traveled around Jacksonville, especially around the beaches, to see how many businesses were really taking the threat of Hugo with a little more seriousness. Even though the main strength of Hugo will pass north of the first coast, some businesses we saw today weren't taking any chances. Some car dealerships were moving all their inventory inside, while other merchants were busy taping and boarding up windows. Most felt that it never hurts to be prepared.
I've got over $5,000 worth of glass I'd like to protect. And old Casa Marina, those tile shingles could come off that building, and I just don't want to see one go through it. Better be safe than sorry.
What was interesting is that not all businesses were getting prepared. One woman had her theory as to why.
It's too nice a day. Usually this is normal out here, you know, wind and stuff, so that nobody's, you know, getting excited about it.
I can tell you right now that some of the businesses driving down to the beach here, some had boarded up, some had taped their windows, but many had not. In fact, one gentleman here just to the right of us, he said that he's very sure Hugo's not going to do a darn thing to the area. In fact, he's so sure he's scheduled live music for his tavern outside tonight. That's a lot of seriousness and a lot of confidence in his own forecast. Now, many of the people we talked to said if Hugo doesn't get there, they're going to be a little bit disappointed. In fact, one gentleman said he's going to have to file for disaster relief just to pay the bills that he had to spend for getting his place ready to prepare for Hugo. So a lot of different opinions here. Many people taking it seriously, many not. Doug?
Brad, I know as news people, a lot of us wish that the storm had been a little bit closer, but now looking at the intensity of this thing, I think we're all better off that it's heading north a little bit. What is the general mood up there, though, in Jacksonville Beach?
Well, we have a lot of spectators here, not only watching this live broadcast, but also just watching the sea. It's quite a beautiful picture, as it were. But you also have some surfers out in the water. There's some people hauling out jet skis. Brave souls indeed, something I wouldn't suggest. But the mood here generally just respectful of such a big storm that Mother Nature can produce.
Okay, Brad, I'm sure there are no surfers in Charleston tonight. Thanks for the report.
Well, the threat of Hugo has caused the Navy to take some precautions. This morning, the USS Doyle, along with the USS Charles Adams, the USS Elusive, and the USS Aries, all went up the St. Johns River to the Talleyrand area. Now, the 4 Mayport ships will stay there, waiting out the storm. No other ships are expected to leave or arrive at Mayport until further notice. Well, if you're waiting to see if your child will be going back to school tomorrow, we have the answer for you as of news time tonight. Schools that will be closed in Georgia include Camden and Glenn counties. St. Johns County schools and Nassau County schools will be closed here in Florida. Duval County officials say they expect for classes to be in tomorrow. Now, if that changes, the announcement will be made at 6 o'clock in the morning. We'll have that information for you at that time. But keep in mind tonight, in those counties where schools are closed today, there will also be no extracurricular activities there tonight as well. Well, coming up next on 17 News, a bus accident in Texas leaves at least 18 teenagers dead.
We'll have that and much more, but first tonight, throughout the show this evening, we'll be giving you some tips, especially those of you in the northern areas of our viewing area, on preparing for Hugo's arrival. Here's the first. The halls of the state capitol in Tallahassee are usually crawling with lobbyists, but today, one lobbyist in particular was the center of attention. Pam Kirkland was a foster parent for little 2-year-old Bradley McGee when that toddler was returned to his natural parents. Kirkland fought against that move, and she proved to be right when the child later died from injuries that his parents gave him. She made the rounds in the Capitol today, handing out teddy bears like the one that Bradley McGee played with to state officials. She's calling for a 12-point plan to reform child protection in Florida.
I think we're tired of the children paying the price, but we adults have a responsibility to protect these children. I think it's long overdue. I know people are being told there's changes coming. You know, wait with us a while longer, but the changes, the words are there, but the actions do not follow the words.
Kirkland attempted to pay an unannounced visit to the governor today. He was out of town in Washington, D.C.
Here are some of the other stories coming into us tonight via satellite. A judge in Tennessee has made what could be a landmark decision involving frozen human embryos. Ruling in a bitter divorce battle, the judge has given custody of the 7 embryos to the wife of Junior Davis. Davis says he's not happy being forced to become a father against his will. 19 students are dead in Alton, Texas. This morning, a school bus was hit from behind by a delivery truck and plunged into a watery gravel pit. 49 others were injured in the accident that's being called the worst of its kind in Texas history. And 2 people are dead in a crash during the takeoff of a U.S. air jetliner. The Boeing 737 skidded in the East River near LaGuardia Airport late last night. 63 people were on board that plane. Well, coming up next, Hugo changes plans at least for one event scheduled for this weekend here in Jacksonville.
And John will be back with more on today's weather and the arrival of Hugo.
And Hugo, once again, may be a storm that many of us may never forget, in South Carolina especially. Details are coming up.
John Gaughan's weather has the seal of approval of the American Meteorological Society.
Well, you know, it's tough to be a duck in a hurricane, and because of that, this Saturday's Great Jacksonville Duck Race for the Cancer Society has been postponed. If you're not familiar with this grand event, it's an opportunity to raise money for the American Cancer Society and an opportunity for you to win a car. Contestants purchase a rubber duck for the price of $5. And then at race time, which has been rescheduled now for October 21st, the ducks will be chucked into the St. Johns River, and the contestant whose duck crosses the finish line first will win a new car.
Well, that's going to be a lot of fun, but I tell you, maybe they didn't have to cancel it after all.
Well, you know, the thing about Hugo is we were pretty sure he was going to either come in Thursday night or Friday, and usually as hurricanes go, once they get out of there, usually you have the best weather of the year, and it looks like Saturday might not be a bad day after all. Just shows you how things can go. But anyway, once again, we were very lucky. I mean, I can't even tell you how lucky we were. Not only did Hugo strengthen considerably, but he had been wobbling around, and it wasn't very clear until maybe in the last couple of hours was he sure that he was going to end up somewhere on the South Carolina coastal areas. And, of course, for them, this storm they will never forget. Of course, this evening, we will be surprised to see how light and easy things are outdoors. Currently outdoors, we're looking at mostly cloudy conditions. Temperatures are a comfortable 78. Humidity is 80 degrees. We're looking at winds that are gusting up out of the northwest to around 13 miles an hour inland. Along the beaches, though, they're seeing winds between 25 and 30 miles an hour at Jax Beach. But already at St. Simon's Island, in the last hour, they've had a wind gust to over 35 miles an hour, and the winds are just beginning to get toward the shoreline. That is to say, the heaviest winds. Here is the radar showing some thunderstorms just off toward the north. This is one of the spiral bands associated with Hugo, and the rains have been falling from Fernandina Beach northward for the last 3 hours, and because of that, I'm almost positive to tell you we are not going to see rains in Jacksonville tonight because it looks like all the activity will continue to rotate with Hugo back up toward the north. Anyways, looking at the satellite this evening, there is Hugo. Look at the big bright white area wrapping around the eye of the hurricane. This is the intense part of the storm. Here's the latest coordinates, 31.2 north, 78.2 west, moving toward the northwest at 20 miles an hour, but the winds right around the eye of the hurricane, 135 miles an hour. And it looks pretty, very ominous for the South Carolina coastal areas for at least the next 12 hours. Winds are of hurricane, or I should say tropical storm force, are just now reaching the coastal areas of South Carolina. Right now, Charleston has winds of around 35 miles an hour. That's it. But the hurricane and the winds that are really strong are right next to the eye of the hurricane, and that is moving onshore. Matter of fact, by 9 o'clock, it'll be just offshore. At that time, they're going to be seeing hurricane force winds in Charleston. What about Brunswick? Well, you too, you'll be seeing your winds pick up to around 55 miles an hour. And at 11 o'clock, Hugo will be moving onshore. Charleston will be getting the worst of it. The eye will be just to their north. And again, Brunswick, you too will be seeing winds probably over 70 miles an hour. Now, at the height of the storm, which will be about 10 o'clock just about everywhere, these are the winds that I'm expecting. Fernandina Beach, around 45 miles an hour. That'll be a gust probably for you. Brunswick, around 80. Savannah, 100. Charleston, 130 miles an hour out of the northwest. But as far as this evening's weather is concerned in the Jacksonville area, don't expect much from Hugo, and be thankful for that, because Hugo would have done massive amounts of destruction here. Unfortunately, it will happen somewhere else in South Carolina. 75 degrees low over at Jax Beach. Some showers may be blowing on shore there. 72 down towards St. Augustine. Palatka, 70, partly cloudy skies. You'd hardly even known anything was happening. Here's your marine forecast. Expect northeasterly winds up to 35 knots. Seas are going to run between 8 and 12 feet. Moderate chop on inland waterway. Surf 7 to 11 feet. Once again, Joyce, we have been spared in a way that we will never understand because, of course, this storm is just so massive and exploded so quickly in the afternoon hours. The people of South Carolina luckily did evacuate, it appears, but still the damage is going to be immense.
And we'll find out all about that tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Details coming up on our 7:30 show, too.
Okay. Well, Herb's coming up next with all of today's sporting news.
And the Gators are getting ready to head up north.
Of course, we've all been concerned about Hurricane Hugo, but the Gators have something else on their mind.
That's right. Nice to know there's something else going on in the world besides the hurricane. Something
football. You know, people ask me about the Hurricane, and I say, well, I think they're 2-0, and I think got a pretty good team down there. I don't know. Let's talk about the Gators, though. They're on the road for the first time this season, Saturday night at Memphis State. There are two things the Gators would like to see happen. Now, one, of course, is to win. The other is to improve. After last weekend's win over Louisiana Tech, Galen Hall noted his defense looked pretty good. His offense had its moments in the second half. Although the Tigers are 0-3, Florida will need some improvement. Remember, it was the Tigers that pulled the upset last October in Gainesville.
They throw the ball pretty well. They have pretty good receivers. They run their fullback a little bit more than other people we've played. Defensively, they're sound. They've been in the football games. They were in the Alabama game last week to the fourth quarter. So a pretty good football team that our players will remember how they played against us last year.
They, in fact, beat the Gators 17-11. Now, as far as tomorrow night's high school prep football games are concerned, no word from Duval County schools, but by 2:40 tomorrow afternoon, a decision concerning those games will be made. Right now, no games, to our knowledge, have been canceled or postponed. We will keep you posted. In the National League this afternoon, San Diego, 4 runs in the ninth, and they beat Cincinnati 11-7 to move within 4.5 games of the West leading Giants. And Chicago broke that 2-game losing streak to beat Philadelphia 9-1 the final. 2 other things today. NBA players apparently will not participate in the 1990 Goodwill Games next summer. Pro players are being allowed into international play, but it's doubtful the details can be worked out for them to take part next July. And sprinter Darrell Robinson said today, Olympic gold medal winner Florence Griffith Joyner bought growth hormones from him. Griffith Joyner says it's not the truth. She called Robinson a compulsive liar, and we're sure to hear more about this.
Boy, we've got another great story brewing.
That's rough.
Are they illegal, growth hormones?
Well, you know, you're not supposed to use anything like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Sort of like steroids?
Yeah, exactly. That's what they are.
Okay.
Well, we'll see, and stay with us, because we'll be right back.
And, of course, we'll have another update, I should say, on Hurricane Hugo.
Tonight, take on a new enemy with the help of an old friend.
I think our friend Collier may be a spy.
Don't lie. The season premiere, Mission Impossible. Then, it's the season premiere of The Young Riders. Then, get a handle on the hot topics with Diane Sawyer and Sam Donaldson. Primetime Live.
Tonight on 17 WJKS.
Well, that's going to do it for 17 News Live at 6 tonight, but that is not all of our coverage of Hurricane Hugo.
In just an hour at 7:30, we'll have a half-hour program on Hugo, taking you from the beginning to its present location, so be sure to join us for that.
And stay tuned all night for the latest updates on Hurricane Hugo. The staff here at Channel 17 News will be staying up all night, if we have to keep you updated and rather keep you updated on the breaking situation up there in South Carolina. And we've got an updated situation on school closings as well.
In Nassau County.
Yeah, Nassau County has now announced that there will be school tomorrow in Nassau County. So we're home free on the First Coast as far as the real bad conditions go.
That's right, but once again, I want to keep in mind that 7:30 show is going to be about Hugo, and the thing about Hugo is this storm is likely to be one that, and I really mean this, they're never going to forget it in South Carolina. Back in '59, they had a big hurricane there called Gracie. Gracie went up the coast and literally leveled 20 miles of beach and all the homes on it. Hugo appears to be larger than Gracie. So once again, the damage in that area is going to be extensive. And another thing is that compared to other storms that we've seen, including last year's big storms, that they've all happened in islands that aren't really related to us here in the United States. But here's a storm that's really going to do it to our own backyard.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget our hurricane hotline.
That's right, 641-1717, category 1701. No, I'm not going to forget it.
Well, as you said, John, we don't know how lucky we are.
That's true. We're very, very lucky. And that is our news for tonight. Thanks for joining us.
We'll be back at 7:30. See you then.